Let's see who was here, though. Nope, don't want that. Bye. Okay. Yep, hello, Hawaii. Virginia, where are you? There you are. Oh, that's West Virginia. Ohio, that region. We don't want that state. Oh. Hello. The Manahoac. We're in Northern Virginia. Never heard that name before. Who are they?
I'm just gonna hide here until more sources just come to me, because I can't seem to find anything anymore.
Are you working? I think you are.
When going in to research a topic that you pretty much know nothing about and you're not sure how you're going to go about this, don't go in fully expecting to find everything. Hi, I made that exact mistake. For this is what I could find. I'm not saying that this is all the information that's out there on the Manahoac. I'm just saying this is what I was able to get a hold of. There's probably things that I just couldn't get to. And I acknowledge that fully. I'm not going to say this is the full picture of them, because I would not be comfortable saying that this is the full picture of them. This is just as much of a picture as I could compile together within the last month and a half or so. So, yeah. The name Manahoac, typically, from what I could find, had various different spellings throughout the centuries. In the 20th and 21st centuries, it's Manahoac, which is the spelling that I'm using, mostly because I got more comfortable using that before I learned about the other spellings. If you go back to the 17th and 18th centuries, you see more commonly Manahoac. There are two other spellings, but it seems to be that the C and K spellings happen to be the most commonly used. Nowadays, it seems that the state of Virginia cannot agree which spelling they like the best. Usually you see a lot of the C spelling, unless you get to the city of Fredericksburg, which is like, nope, we're different. We're going to use the K spelling instead. So there's that, which is all fun and games until you have to start doing research and you're like, ugh, names. It is thought that the Manahoac were of the Siouan linguistic family with their own language. We don't actually know specifically, but it's believed that they were part of the Siouan linguistic family. And if Siouan sounds vaguely familiar, it is the same language family that the Sioux indigenous language comes from. It is the fifth most spoken indigenous language within the Canada and the US as well. The other four that precede it are on the screen at this moment. Yeah. So, with that being said, it is thought that the name Manahoac means they are very merry, they were very merry, but that is a definition that was written down in about 1895, give or take. However, the Manahoacs themselves do seem to fall out of the historical record around 1730. And while in 1871, that time frame, there was a man in Canada named Nicona, again, name on the screen, that was thought to be the last full-blooded Tutelo speaker, indigenous speaker from the state of what is now Virginia. He had met with a ethnographer who was studying the languages on the reserve that he was living in. He was thought to be the last member of that grouping that spoke the same language. And while arguably there were resources that I was finding that were tying him to the Manahoac, there's also ones that was tying him to the Tutelo tribe. Again, there doesn't seem to be that much of a clear consistency as to yes, we know this is a fact, this is a fact, this is a fact. There's just a similar possibility. The Tutelo language itself was another Siouan language. So that's where this assumption that Manahoac also was Siouan as well. So there's this idea, from what I could find in all of this searching and whatnot, that the Manahoac people originated in what is now the Ohio River Valley. That was corroborated by different sources from many different individuals. So there's this idea that that is where they came from before they ended up in what is now the Virginia Piedmont in around 1608. No dates on when that transition happened. It's just by 1608 they were in the Piedmont area. However, there was one source that I found that was kind of weird, was stating that the first records of them was around 1450, but it was only a single source that said that, and no one else was saying that, and it didn't back up why it was believed that that was the first presence of them. So I was like, that's kind of weird. No one else is saying this, and you're not telling me why, so we're going to ignore that one. But if you, for some reason, want to look into who these people are, and you find that, like, hey, more power to you, but, like, I couldn't find out why. But, yeah. So, by 1608, they are in the Virginia Piedmont and are put down on a map as to where their territory was on another map in 1624, which was compiled by the information acquired in 1608. This map was put together by colonizer extraordinaire John Smith, who is rather infamous, and he puts them as being north of the Rappahannock River at that point in time. And yeah, so he also, it's not stated in the map itself, it's a written record later on that they were west of the fall line. And so the fall line is the division point between the Piedmont region and the coastal plains region. And yeah, so we've got that vague area. The only, like, clear established this was their boundaries within what is now the state of Virginia that I could find came from this website called Native Lands, and they are, I believe they're out of Canada. It's a .ca, so I'm like 90% sure it's out of Canada, though you can buy domains, so who knows. And they, from the looks of it, they had them Northern Virginia area, so like Frederick County over towards Fairfax County, maybe Arlington as well, but I know for a fact their map looked to encompass Fairfax. So you've got that portion, which is north of the Rappahannock, which is corroborated by the map, and their map was the Native Lands map was putting their southern boundary somewhere around north of the James River, which historically was called Powhatan River after the Powhatan chiefdom, the chief of the Powhatan Confederation words. But that was kind of a gray area because that was also listed as being Monacan territory. So it could just be that it was a shared territory. It could just be that different points in time. Who knows? But that's like the vague area that I could find, and that's about as well as I could do for that. One thing that I always love to find out is culturally, how is a group of people? How were a group of people? And from what I can find, we don't know when it comes to the Manahoac. With what I could find, we have fragments. And fragments can tell you a bit, but they don't tell you the whole picture, which really irks me, but I guess that's what we have to go off of, is these little fragments. So we know for a fact that reportedly, once the English colonizers were in what is now Virginia in the summer of 1608, I've heard specifically August, but we're just going to go broadly and say summer. Our main colonizer guy, John Smith, sailed up the Rappahannock with a group of other English colonizers. and were reportedly attacked by a quote-unquote hostile force of Manahoac and were just berated with arrows. Now, this apparently was a very short skirmish according to later documents from the English, but they do report that yes, this attack did happen, and they did find out that it was reportedly because the Manahoac thought that the English were coming to take away their land, which makes, at least in my mind, this attack completely valid. Kind of what the English were doing. They're like, hey, this land is our land now, so it's valid that they were attacked. At one point, after this attack is ceased for a bit, the English come across a wounded Manahoac. I think they're referring to him as a warrior, an individual, someone who was part of the party that was on the attack end of the Manahoac tribe themselves, and his name was Amorlek, name on screen. I'm not exactly sure how I'm supposed to pronounce it, but they did capture him. They did interrogate him, and they managed to acquire bits of information from him about the Manahoac, a name of a hunting village, some like villages where people lived, and later on another band of Manahoac came back and attacked the English once again, but the English had a translator with them, and through the translator managed to get across that the English were being nice despite capturing and interrogating this individual to the Manahoac that was now with them. And the second attack then ceased, and supposedly some bit of trade went back and forth between the two, but that's kind of where that bit ends. After 1608 and to 1670, there was really no contact between the colonizers and the Manahoac, so we don't know what's going on. At least in that front, we can kind of find little bits of things archaeologically what was going on, but we don't have anything like narratively that I could find of what was going on between them, because the Powhatan and another tribe confederation group that they were aligned with had put this like essentially a blockade against the English going into the interior, and then by 1670 it had dissipated enough that more colonizers could get into the interior, but by then it was seemingly a different group, and from what I can find, another 60 years go by and the Manahoac seem to fall off of the historical map, which irks me beyond belief. But yeah, we don't have much culturally on them. We have that they were defensive of their land, they're very protective of it, which is valid. This is their home. They didn't want their home taken from them. It's completely valid in my mind. I have mentioned at this point several different allusions to the date 1730, or the vague date of 1730, being the last we have established record of the Manahoac themselves. So all of this being in the past tense. After that, we don't really know, from what I could find, what happens to them exactly, which is awful. So there's this idea that they could have assimilated into like tribes. They could have joined with the Monacans to the south of them, who at this point in time, from what I could find, were similar to them. They were tribes that were aligned with one another, or they could have aligned themselves with or assimilated into the Tutelo tribe, which that them aligning themselves with the Tutelo then also brings the story of Nakonha into further light. It does make more sense in that case, at least with how I'm seeing things, but again, we don't exactly know. Hello, editing me here. I realized that I didn't do a proper conclusion for this, but it didn't really feel right to just kind of end it where I had. So, while for the Manahoac, specifically for this video, I was talking in the past tense because they're a tribe that seems to no longer exist, at least in the historical form that I was looking into. And for the context video that precedes this, it kind of felt like it was in the past tense. It's important to remember that these are maybe not the Manahoac specifically, and maybe not other tribes that no longer exist. It is important to remember that these are people that are still here. The indigenous community is still within the US, it's still within Canada, it is still within North America, and there's ones in South America as well. These are people that are still here. They are not people that are just in history books anymore. And while you can go and do your own research for whatever purposes that you want, it is important to remember that these are people that are still here. If you're looking into tribes that no longer exist, it might be a bit more difficult in some cases to find information on them. But if you're looking into tribes that do exist, at least in the US, there's some 600, at least state and federally recognized nations and tribes and groups and whatever term they're using to describe themselves that are still here. You can go, and if they have websites, you can find out through that way. You can read about them through books. You can, some of them you can directly contact the tribe, and I guess you could ask questions and whatnot. I don't know if that's something that they would be open to, but you can still go out and learn about these people that are still here. If you're like me and you're a museum sort of person, you can go and you can see these remnants of tribes that no longer exist in museums, but you can also see pieces of tribes that do exist still in museums. And while I've never had the wish to go to Oklahoma, within the last week or so, this week being today, well, specifically today being the 20th of September 2021, a few days back, a museum opened up in Oklahoma that is dedicated to the 39 tribes and nations recognized within the state of Oklahoma and their stories, and it's told through their lens. It's not told through the colonizer or the white man. It is the story of the indigenous population told by the indigenous population. And whenever you're seeing this, if you've been there, please comment down below. I myself have not been there yet. Hi, I'm in Virginia, but I will be there at some point. And there's numerous different places, maybe not specifically entirely dedicated to the indigenous people and tribes and nations, or the ones in that area, or just in general. There might be museums that just have a small exhibit on them, or there might be museums that the whole thing is dedicated to them. You can learn through that element. You can learn through books. You can learn through documentaries. You can learn through anything in that realm. And while that's all fine and good, it's also important to remember that while there is the beautiful elements of learning about their culture, their language, their food, everything about them that makes them them, it's also important to remember that, I don't know if attack is the right word to use here, but maybe threat is better. It feels like, at least from what I was learning, it feels like they are under threat in a way by entities like the government at the moment, where there's the Line 3 pipeline up north going through, I believe it is the Lakota lands, that could possibly contaminate their water supply, which, newsflash, bad idea. And if you've heard anything about the recent case of Gabby Petito going missing in the state of Wyoming, this is not to diminish her case at all. It is awful. But between 2011 and 2021, some 700 indigenous women went missing within the state of Wyoming. And you don't hear about any of them. If you look up on the FBI's investigations website, you don't see any of them, but you see Gabby Petito. There's 700 missing women that went missing in the same state. So, well, yes, you can go and find and research all of these beautiful elements about their culture, their food, everything that makes them them. It is also important to remember that there is this tragic element as well, where they're still fighting to be themselves and to find their missing people and keep their culture alive in the modern day. So, that's my 2 cents.